Just another overlooked April Saturday morning. Lucas Hargrove handed over $100 at a scrapyard, dragging home a lifeless shell most people would toss out without a second glance. Bare metal, rusted roof seams, a faded plate. To the untrained eye, it was just worthless junk. His neighbor Diana Caldwell watched from her gate, clutching her morning coffee. She laughed loud enough to make sure the entire street heard. "You just taught your son the fastest way to waste money," she scoffed. Lucas stayed quiet. He saw the hidden potential and simply got to work. 5 days later, a motorsport legend arrived at that exact driveway, holding a $5 million check. What was really hiding beneath that rust? You and I are about to uncover a treasure everyone else completely missed. 34-year-old Lucas Hargrove lived a tough, quiet life that the superficial crowd usually dismissed without a thought. Up at 5 every morning, he quietly packed his boy Wyatt's school lunch. He studied the handwritten schedule taped to the fridge. Then he headed out to the backyard garage, turning wrenches in the shadows as a freelance mechanic. Quiet word of mouth kept him busy. It mostly paid the bills. When it fell short, he suffered in total silence, bothering nobody. 2 years prior, his wife Sarah was tragically killed in an interstate car crash. The careless driver survived untouched. The crushing medical debt she left behind certainly did not. Lucas quietly chipped away at the debt, demanding absolutely zero pity from the outside world. People on Marlowe Street easily looked past him, seeing nothing but a quiet widower with a rusty truck and a little kid. They weren't completely wrong. They just missed the treasure hidden in plain sight. 7-year-old Wyatt was missing a tooth, fiercely clutching a scruffy stuffed bear he took absolutely everywhere. Sarah had named the toy Bolt the night Wyatt was born, honoring her deep passion for racing. She adored the pure blur of speed and the rich scent of motor oil. The tattered bear was stitched with mismatched thread, seen as totally worthless by everyone else. Wyatt cherished it anyway. Lucas almost never mentioned Sarah. When Wyatt asked, his father gave him entirely honest, complete answers. But he rarely dug up those precious stories completely unprompted. His grief was ignored by everyone, invisible to strangers on the surface, deeply, permanently anchored underneath. Elijah Cross was the only neighbor who actually saw Lucas's true worth. The 40-year-old ran a gritty little auto repair shop down at the very end of Marlowe Street. He possessed that rare, overlooked gift of knowing exactly when to speak and when to simply share a quiet cup of coffee. On quiet Friday evenings, Elijah often brought sandwiches, and they'd eat in that dusty garage, while young Wyatt tackled his homework right on the oily workbench. He was the sole adult the boy truly trusted enough to call by his first name, skipping the formal sir or uncle entirely. Diana Caldwell had moved into their street 18 months earlier. Her flawless house boasted a sharp black door and a shiny white Audi parked at a pristine angle. She had flawless window boxes stuffed with fancy flowers that never ever wilted. The 31-year-old worked as a high-end real estate broker. She judged everyone by a superficial set of standards, enforcing her shiny rules with absolute, punishing consistency. You and I know people like her, not purely cruel, just entirely blind to anything beneath the surface. She and Lucas had swapped barely 40 words over 18 long months. She once suggested, flashing a hollow smile that only technically counted as friendly, that he might want to find a neighborhood better suited for his lifestyle. Lucas simply ignored her shallow judgment, stared for a second, and calmly walked inside. She saw rudeness, he saw logic. Most folks totally missed the bigger picture. On Marlowe Street, idle gossip spread wildly, yet no one ever noticed what was actually important. Houses packed tight, windows stared blindly at windows. Neighbors walked dogs slowly, looking at faces but seeing nothing. Driveway drama became public news overnight, yet they ignored the real treasures. Carter Voss ran the local auto salvage for 30 years, tossing aside history on the edge of town. His rusty lot was fenced in, smelling like transmission fluid and discarded history. Carter was 60, brutally blunt, totally blind to hidden value. He priced his junk by gut feeling, never digging deeper. That morning, Lucas arrived for a simple carburetor, right when destiny was hiding in plain sight. Carter was busy crushing a massive vehicle collection, just tossing it all away. They came from an expired private storage unit, abandoned and completely ignored. The estate executor just wanted the entire lot cleared by Monday. Carter just wanted cash. Neither man cared about preserving actual history. Lucas strolled the back row. Then he spotted what everyone missed. It sat neglected in a dark corner, buried under a leaning, rusted metal roof. You and I know this is where the best secrets hide. The shell was a two-door coupe. Once painted black, weather and time had decayed it into a sad patchwork of bare, peeling metal, to an ordinary passing eye, pure scrap. But its hidden proportions made him freeze in his tracks. The wheelbase stretched far too long for a typical frame of that size. That windshield angle was dangerously steep. No basic production car ever looked like this. Those wheel arches were entirely shaped by hand. He saw the truth without even touching the metal, just watching how that perfect curve aligned. A master craftsman poured endless thought into this machine before bringing it to life. Drawn to the lost relic, he rested his palm on the rear quarter panel without even thinking. The frozen metal hummed beneath his skin, buried beneath decades of ugly grime. He felt pure hand-shaped artistry, not some cheap machine-pressed garbage that people usually buy. Let's look closer here. The difference was tiny, but to a man who truly knew cars, that hidden magic was undeniable. Carter walked up clueless. That junk is $100. Take it now, or I'm feeding it to the crusher on Monday morning. Lucas froze, staring at the discarded masterpiece. He pictured his son's cramped shoes, a size too small for 6 whole weeks because money was always painfully tight. He remembered the heavy electricity bill still waiting on his kitchen counter. He knew he could never logically justify this choice to anyone who asked. Why he was risking his cash on an ignored rusted relic he hardly understood. He paid the $100. Checking the ruined interior before towing, a tiny scrap of a sticker flaked off the doorframe. It drifted into the dirt, totally unnoticed by the world. He snatched up the paper scrap, shoving it inside his pocket without even studying it. He would inspect it later. He sensed its hidden worth even if he could not explain why. That tow back home looked incredibly slow and absolutely foolish. Elijah's pickup, a basic tow rope. The ignored treasure dragged behind at 15 miles an hour. Its dead steering made the rusted coupe drift wildly across the lane. They hit Marlowe Street around 9:40 a.m., slowly dragging the secret prize straight into his driveway. At least 6 neighbors watched the whole spectacle from a safe distance. The lady across the street hid behind curtains, seeing only trash. 2 kids on bikes skidded to a dead stop. A guy walking his dog froze at the corner, just staring at the spectacle. Diana stood right at her gate. Lucas didn't spot her when he pulled onto the block, but she had been waiting, perfectly timed to judge his arrival. People always mock the value they can't see, don't they? He heard her perfectly. A quick, sharp laugh from the neighbor, quickly hidden away. He caught the words, "poor kid." They didn't hit him, they landed right next to Wyatt. His son stood near the driveway edge, morning backpack still slung over his tired shoulders. He had rushed out when the tow truck rumbled up. Lucas completely ignored the noise. He slammed the truck into park, stepped out and told his boy, "Go inside and grab my tool bag." Wyatt glanced at Diana once, no anger in his eyes, just a quiet, careful understanding. Then he studied the rusted shell, matching the exact reverent gaze his dad had at the scrapyard. Head tilted just a bit, like he was listening for a hidden secret. Then he turned and walked inside. Lucas unhooked the heavy tow rope. He took his time. He didn't fake being calm, he just was. When you've survived real heartbreak, the cheap judgments of a neighbor over a rusted frame don't even manage to leave a scratch. That night, with Wyatt fast asleep, Lucas finally got to work. He rigged up twin work lights in the garage and clicked on the little radio tucked between his wrenches and socket sets. Then he began cleaning the junker methodically, working patiently from the bottom up. Moving back to front slow enough to uncover what the rust was hiding. He applied a heavy solvent. He took a cloth to the driver's footwell and decades of stubborn grime peeled away in sheets. Right underneath, stamped directly into the bare metal floor, sat a hidden chassis number. He stared at it for ages. This wasn't your standard factory vehicle format. It totally broke every single vehicle identification structure he knew. The prefix held 7 characters, starting with the letters R, A, and C, trailing into 2 numbers and 2 final letters. He snapped a quick phone picture. He searched online for 40 minutes and found absolutely nothing solid. He dug up one obscure link to a European racing registry using similar codes in the early 70s. But this exact sequence wasn't listed in any public automotive database out there. He shot Elijah a quick text. Ever see a chassis prefix kicking off with RAC 67? Elijah replied 11 minutes later, nope. Go to sleep, but Lucas stayed wide awake. He dug into his shirt pocket, pulling out that tiny, ignored sticker fragment he had rescued from the scrapyard dirt. He held it directly under the glaring work light, mostly faded away. Decades had turned the glue to dust, leaving the paper completely dissolved around the edges. All that survived was a piece of a logo, a stylized wheel, and right beside it, what looked exactly like a sharp, boldly rendered graphic of a racing flame. You and I know true craftsmanship stands out. Something about its sharp precision hit him. That sheer visual confidence proved this wasn't just slapped onto a basic commuter vehicle. He gently taped the historic scrap to clean white paper and finally headed inside. Next morning, Elijah showed up before the coffee even brewed. Lucas had phoned at 6:45 just saying, "Come take a look at something." We always walk past miracles. Elijah lay under that rusted shell for 5 speechless minutes. When he finally slid out, he sat up, giving Lucas a look that saw past the rust, blending professional worry with wild excitement. "The frame is hand-reinforced," he whispered, "not factory stock. Someone welded custom gusseting on every single joint. That is no weekend hobby. That is months of expert labor by a master who understood true performance." He stood, walked to the front of the junker, opened the rusted hood, and leaned close. "Lucas, this is not a standard engine. This block was machined and bored out completely by hand." He stood straight. "Whoever built this masterpiece wanted pure speed, backed by serious cash and brilliant engineering. Let's look closer." Lucas had already photographed those hidden suspension parts. The angles were completely wrong for a street vehicle. They were wrong in a way that screamed custom track day tuning. Those springs underneath weren't cheap standard catalog parts meant for ordinary drivers. They were fully custom fabricated. That afternoon, he found an obscure vintage racing forum, a dusty setup, a text-heavy site where veterans had kept the exact same usernames since the early days of the web. He signed up, uploading photos of the secret chassis number and the suspension geometry. He added the body curves and sticker fragment, writing a careful description of his salvaged treasure. He asked if anyone recognized any piece of this relic. By the very next morning, 47 replies waited. For this quiet, forgotten community, that response was absolutely extraordinary. The hardcore forum members fiercely argued. Several assumed it was just a clever 1980s kit build, an ambitious project slapped together from catalog scraps. But 3 users boasted deep professional backgrounds in true motorsport history. They knew better. One expert posted under the handle garage legend TS. He wrote, "If that chassis number is authentic, you found a holy grail that has been on this community's missing list for 15 straight years." Another sent a panicked private message, "Stop posting public photos." "Trust me." Lucas quickly printed the thread, guarding the secret in a folder. "Stick with me here." That evening, Wyatt sat on an overturned bucket in the garage. It was his usual spot whenever he watched his dad restore old junk. He held Bolt the Bear firmly in his lap. He watched his dad polish the grimy rear panel for a while before asking, "Does the car have a name?" Lucas paused, respecting the thought. "Not yet. You want to pick?" Wyatt studied the rusted metal seriously. He stared just like Lucas did at the scrapyard, head tilted, seeing the hidden glory in its raw shape rather than trying to find a random word. After a silent moment, he said, "Bolt." Lucas lowered his polishing cloth. He froze, letting the meaning settle. He simply said, "That's a good name," and resumed his careful work. By day 4, Lucas was scraping the passenger B-pillar when he realized the crude paint was suspiciously thick right there. He took fine grit paper, sanding through the ugly black to uncover a hidden truth. A layer of white blue, a rare, slightly metallic shade you won't find in any modern factory. He recognized the faded color distantly. The way you and I know a famous song from a decade we didn't live. He'd only seen it in pictures. He worked gently now, treating the rusted metal like an archaeological dig, scraping away decades of neglect in thin layers, searching for the treasure hidden beneath. And there, on the inner pillar, where you and I would probably never think to look, he finally spotted it. A stamped mark pressed right into the raw steel, not some cheap sticker. Not a bolted plate, but a physical impression hammered deep inside the steel. A serial number, and right next to it, a stylized signature of 3 connected letters. He snapped a photo, then searched for 3 hours. At 2 in the morning, he hit gold in a scanned automotive trade magazine from 1983. The vintage piece detailed the collapse of a legendary racing team, running out of the American Southwest through the 70s and early 80s. Back then, they were the most technically advanced crew in all of endurance racing. The writer noted, just briefly, that several early prototype cars built by the team had been destroyed in a massive warehouse fire during the autumn of 1983. Ignored near the bottom of the page was a detail about those lost machines. One was a highly unique prototype, a secret testbed for a revolutionary chassis design that never officially hit the track. Yet, according to the writer, its hidden design principles had quietly shaped the engineering of competitive endurance cars for the next 10 years. Everyone assumed the rare prototype burned. It was never spotted again. That hidden signature stamped on the pillar, it belonged to a guy named Marcus Webb. The magazine named him as the genius lead engineer behind the racing crew. One easily missed sentence noted he died in a tragic testing crash back in 1982. 1 year before the fire that supposedly claimed his greatest automotive creation forever. A man named Dominic Ashford had owned and operated the entire racing operation. Lucas just sat there staring at his ignored treasure until sunrise crept under the door. Now let's watch human nature kick in. Elijah tried staying quiet but eventually spilled the secret to his wife. Holding a secret this massive for 48 hours is simply too much for any ordinary person to ignore. His wife told the woman 2 doors down, just to get the heavy burden off her chest. That neighbor told her husband, who quickly passed the rumor to the guy walking his retriever. By the very next morning, Marlowe Street reached that funny state of quiet neighborhood awareness, a place where every single person knows the hidden truth, but nobody mentions it out loud. 2 neighbors showed up at Lucas's garage using the most ridiculous excuses. One needed to borrow a tire gauge, the other claimed they were hunting for a missing cat. Both just stared past him, trying to spot the ignored junker, until finally said, "Thank you," and shut the heavy door. After that second visit, he hid his priceless masterpiece under a cheap blue tarp. By the time Diana heard the tale, 4 different people had already twisted it. The fine details were completely blurry, but the giant shape of the truth remained intact. The rumor she caught was that Lucas's $100 scrap pile might actually be worth millions of dollars. She laughed out loud, dismissed it as some silly plot from a fake TV show. We'd all doubt it. She just opened her laptop. She finally Googled Dominic Ashford, reading intently for 20 solid minutes. She uncovered photos of a lean, white-haired guy in his 50s, standing proudly beside a legendary historic car collection at an auction house. And right beside that picture, a financial article estimating the famous collector's net worth at well over $1 billion. Wealth built from a massive pile of racing winnings. Smart early bets on new automotive tech startups. And a fleet of historic barn finds whose value skyrocketed over 40 long years. Tucked at the very bottom of that profile was a tiny, easily ignored footnote, mentioning he had spent 10 years quietly hunting for a very specific racing prototype. A classic car from his racing days everyone blindly assumed burned to ashes. Diana shut the laptop. You and I know she finally saw the treasure hiding under that blue tarp. That afternoon she marched to his front door, holding a plastic measuring cup, claiming she just needed to borrow a simple kitchen appliance. Lucas opened the door, listened closely, and simply said, "I don't have one." He shut the door, not being rude, just with the quiet finality of a man who guards his time from people who judge by appearances. She lingered on the step for a second, then retreated back to her own house. By the quiet evening of the 4th day, an email landed in the inbox tied to Lucas's car restoration forum account. The sender's name popped up as Giselle Hartman. Her signature line read, "Executive Assistant, Office of Dominic Ashford." The message itself was extremely brief. It stated her wealthy boss had seen the forum discussion and the photos of the rusted shell posted there. It said if Mr. Hargrove truly had the overlooked scrap treasure he described, the famous collector would absolutely love to meet with him in person. It said a meeting could be set up within 24 hours, entirely at his own convenience. It asked him to confirm. Lucas stared at that email 3 times, sitting entirely still with hands pressed flat against his kitchen table. Then he walked straight out to the garage, sat beside the hidden gem and called Elijah. "Are you awake? It's 9:30. I got a message from Dominic Ashford's office." Complete silence. "Say that again slowly." Lucas repeated the incredible news. An even longer silence followed. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet." He stared right at that overlooked blue tarp. "I wanted to tell someone first." "You told the right guy," Elijah replied. "Now tell Giselle Hartman you will see them tomorrow." The 5th morning was Saturday. To you and me, that feels like destiny, not just some random coincidence. Lucas woke up at 5, brewed coffee. He packed Wyatt's breakfast, even though it was Saturday and school was officially out. Because steady routine was the foundation of their days, and he rarely broke it without pure cause. He pulled on his nicest dark green flannel shirt, the only one lacking obvious grease stains. He briefly realized how this cheap outfit looked to the outside world. He ignored the judgment completely. He wore the green shirt. Wyatt asked between bites of breakfast, "Is someone special coming today?" Lucas gently replied, "Maybe." Wyatt then asked, "Is Bolt going to stay?" Lucas just smiled at his boy. He finally said, "Let's see what the day brings." Elijah rolled up at 9 uninvited. "Because you and I know uncovering true treasure always demands a witness." He gripped 2 cups of coffee, guarding a prize that nobody else even saw. He wore the tense, silent look of a guy trying to hide a massive gamble. "You and I know value hides in plain sight." At 10, a black Cadillac arrived. Lucas waited in the driveway as the heavy car parked. Down the street, completely ignoring her morning routine, Diana Caldwell watched through her front window. She had been staring for 20 minutes, letting her coffee go completely cold in her hand. Dominic Ashford usually ignored ordinary things. He rarely looked surprised by anything at all. 58 years old, carrying the lean frame of a man who built things himself. Short white hair and weathered hands proving decades of serious, heavy labor. He stepped out without fuss. Leaving the passenger seat, he marched straight toward the garage. He moved like a man who knew a priceless barn find was waiting inside. He stopped cold when he saw the rusted metal. Giselle Hartman followed with her tablet, stepping aside to let him look. Elijah lingered near the garage door, just watching the scene. Standing like a ghost, present for the big reveal, but keeping quiet while the experts worked. Dominic slowly circled the car, pacing just like Lucas did at the junkyard when everyone else had ignored it. Reaching out occasionally, lightly brushing the rusted steel. He stayed silent for minutes. Lucas just watched him, letting the history speak. Finally, Dominic anchored himself at the rear bumper and just stood completely still. When he finally spoke, his voice was incredibly calm. "I thought it was gone forever." Lucas asked, "You know this car?" Dominic looked right at him, seeing past the rust. "I built it. 1971. It took 2 years, costing me way more than just money." He turned back to the wreck. "In 1983, I was told it burned to ashes along with everything else." He hesitated. "I believed the lie because I needed some closure." He walked to the passenger side, crouching low by the rusted door pillar. "Let's look closely here." He stayed quiet, then pressed one finger against a hidden signature stamped into the steel. He knelt there for a full minute, one finger touching the cold steel, completely frozen, unable to speak a word. "Marcus Webb was my lead engineer," he finally whispered out. "He died testing a car in spring 1982. He never saw this masterpiece race. It never raced once. It was a secret development prototype. We built it to prove a wild theory Marcus obsessed over for 4 solid years. The design was perfect. It changed how endurance chassis were built for the next 15 years. He stood up. Marcus hand-stamped his mark on every single structure he built. He said, "An engineer should sign their work just like an artist signs a painting." Lucas quietly asked, "What happened to the car after the fire?" "If it didn't burn," Dominic shook his head, baffled, "I have no idea. Somebody dragged this treasure out before the blaze, or it just wasn't parked inside. I hired people to look for it twice. Eventually, I just gave up hope." He stared at Lucas. "How did you spot this?" Lucas explained everything. He kept the truth simple. He didn't dress up how he uncovered this relic. He said he visited the local junkyard just looking for a cheap carburetor. He admitted this racing legend was rotting in the back, waiting for the crusher. We all miss things, but he noticed those rare proportions. The hidden shape made him stop when everyone else walked away. Dominic listened in total silence. Once Lucas finished, he asked, "Why did you buy it?" It looked like nothing special. Lucas took a moment thinking. He didn't rush. I can't completely explain it honestly. There was just something in its lines, the way the metal flowed. It didn't look like a random piece of junk. It looked like someone poured their soul into it. Dominic held his steady gaze. Marcus used almost those exact words when he first showed me the original sketches. You and I know that kind of heavy silence, a quiet with real weight. The kind of stillness that hits when someone finally speaks a hidden truth. Little Wyatt showed up at the garage entrance. Gripping his stuffed bear under one arm, he held the doorframe with his free hand. He just stood there, watching. Lucas turned softly. "Come here." Wyatt stepped off carefully, standing right beside his dad. Dominic studied the boy. Wyatt glanced at the old collector, then the rusted treasure, then back at him. He mumbled, "Well, my dad named this car Bolt." Dominic's face shifted softly. It was a tiny reaction, but clear if you looked closely. Staring at the battered car and hearing that name, true emotion washed over him. He turned his eyes back to the boy. "That is a very good name." Wyatt thought about that for a second. Then he asked, "Did you miss it?" "The car, I mean." Dominic paused. "I missed it terribly." "Dad says you only miss the things that actually matter," Wyatt told him innocently. Giselle stepped up without a sound, handing a tablet to Lucas. The screen showed a massive offer, $5 million. Right below that sat a simple, one-page purchase agreement for the forgotten relic. Dominic spoke up. "I don't play games with negotiations. That is its true worth to me and history. You can refuse it. Take your time." Lucas stared at the life-changing money, then at his boy. He eyed the masterpiece again. He studied its elegant, sweeping curves and the cold, forgotten metal gleaming quietly beneath the harsh glare of the garage lights. He didn't give an answer. Later that night, long after the collectors left, Lucas just sat staring at the car, doing nothing. Wyatt was inside watching television. Elijah hung around for an hour before heading home. He knew better than to force a deep talk that wasn't ready to happen. Lucas just thought about Sarah. She always kept a sketchbook filled with beautiful classic cars. Not rigid blueprints, but emotional sketches, the way you draw something you truly adore. There was one specific treasure she sketched repeatedly, always in slightly different, loving variations. A low, sweeping coupe with a sharp windshield and wheel arches that looked hand-carved, not factory-stamped. He had studied those pages. He saw it 100 times, assuming she was just drawing a famous classic from memory. You and I can see the truth now. She wasn't sketching from memory at all. She was drawing pure imagination, dreaming up a legendary masterpiece she had only read stories about. He thought about the perfect name Wyatt gave the car, completely unaware of its history. The toy bear and the rusted race car, both carrying that exact same name. A 7-year-old boy sensed the magic, relying purely on instinct in that dingy garage. Lucas picked up his phone and dialed Giselle. "I have one strict condition." "One condition," he said, "and then I accept," she replied quietly. "Tell me." "The car gets displayed publicly, not hidden in some private collection. It goes somewhere everyone can see it." Lucas paused. "And the placard must state it was identified by someone who recognized its true historical value when everyone else only saw useless rust. You don't have to use my name, but Marcus Webb's name gets displayed right there clearly. And his brilliant engineering gets explained so any regular person can truly understand what he built." Giselle replied, "I will relay this to Mr. Ashford immediately." Lucas simply waited. 8 minutes passed before she called back. "He agrees to everything, but wants to add something. He wants the little boy's name on that placard, too. He said the treasure has a name now, and the person who named it should be officially recorded." Lucas pressed a hand over his eyes for a long moment. He sat there in the quiet garage, processing the hidden victory. Then he whispered, "Tell him thank you." The next morning, his doubting neighbor Diana came outside empty-handed. Lucas caught sight of this right from his kitchen window. For the first time in 18 months, she stood outside without her usual coffee cup or any prop of casual normalcy. She watched from her front gate as the massive flatbed transport truck backed carefully out into the street. Lucas stepped outside to supervise the loading process. He watched elite restoration technicians secure the support harness to the undercarriage. They treated the rusted relic with absolute reverence. Diana slowly walked across the street. She stopped just a few feet from him. She tried speaking, but Lucas showed no smug victory, no cheap satisfaction, no performance. He just said, "It's all right, Diana. Next time you see someone buy something they truly believe in, maybe wait 5 days before weighing in." She had absolutely no answer for that. She opened her mouth, then quietly closed it. We both know true worth is rarely obvious. Lucas turned back, hearing her walk away. Wyatt wandered out the front door and stood on the porch in his pajamas, holding his stuffed bear. He quietly watched their hidden treasure loaded onto the massive flatbed. The boy raised one hand, giving a small, solemn wave. Lucas caught the touching gesture from the corner of his eye. He said absolutely nothing, but his throat tightened with unexpected, overwhelming emotion. The absolute fortune arrived in his bank account 3 weeks later on a Tuesday, one massive transfer. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at that impossible number on his laptop screen for a very long time, completely frozen. The very first thing he did was call the hospital billing office, clearing the remaining balance on Sarah's massive medical debt, the full amount in one single payment. A brief conversation that lasted exactly 4 minutes, ending simply with Lucas saying, "Thank you." He hung up before the shocked administrator could even say another word. He just sat there in total silence for a moment. You and I know the real prize wasn't just cash. The financial weight was finally gone, but the feeling wasn't triumph. It felt more like the crisp relief of a room after a window gets opened during the winter. Suddenly lighter, a completely different temperature, the stale air finally moving again. He went and bought Wyatt new shoes, the perfect size. They were a style Wyatt had quietly admired in a store window 6 months earlier, never even asking for them. He also bought a building block set depicting a highly detailed replica of a classic endurance racing car. Handing the box to his son, Lucas smiled and said, "I thought you might want to build one yourself." Wyatt studied this brand new little treasure for a long moment. Then he looked up at his father, asking, "Can we build it together?" Lucas said, "Yeah, this weekend." He called Elijah to invest in that small, overlooked shop. No fancy paperwork involved, just quiet trust between two guys who knew real value when they saw it. Elijah naturally argued the principle, but accepted soon enough. He knew a genuine gift was rare. They planned to expand the dusty garage, add a lift, and train a new apprentice. The remaining money quietly funded a program at Wyatt's school. Lucas named it after Sarah. You and I know the heaviest burdens are invisible. It simply helped kids carrying weight a school photo hides. He never even showed up for the big dedication ceremony. Just mailed a signed letter and politely turned down the chance to speak. 3 weeks after the funds cleared, Giselle Hartman called up, inviting Lucas and Wyatt to a brand new exhibition opening down at the City Transport Museum, a gallery honoring the gritty engineering history of American endurance racing. Right there in the center sat that rusted treasure, fully restored to its glory from the autumn of 1971, coated in the white-blue paint that its builder, Marcus Webb, chose because, according to a handwritten archive note nobody had noticed for decades, he believed white-blue belonged to things moving way faster than they were ever allowed to. Lucas drove them into the city on a Thursday evening. Wyatt wore his nice new shoes, clutching Bolt the bear right in the crook of his arm. Dominic was already waiting inside when they showed up. He shook Lucas's hand, then crouched down to meet the little guy at eye level. Suspended on a low platform under calibrated lights, the car sat center stage. Every inch of its forgotten beauty was finally visible from every single angle. It looked absolutely incredible. A masterpiece imagined ahead of its time, hidden in the dirt for 40 years, finally back in the light. A detailed information placard hung right on the wall nearby. Lucas read the words slowly. Marcus Webb's name stood out. The plain text honestly described the brilliant engineering beneath the hood, the radical geometry, the quiet years of work, the immense influence that rippled through time while everyone completely ignored its true source. Near the very bottom sat a quiet sentence about its recovery. Let's picture that, plucked from a junkyard by a guy who saw the raw magic everyone else had walked past. Just beneath that, in much smaller text, rested another line. The car was named Bolt by a 7-year-old boy named Wyatt Hargrove, who believed it was the perfect name, and honestly it was. Wyatt stood perfectly still in front of that machine for a long, quiet moment. Then, without even turning his head, he asked, "Dad, is Bolt happy here?" Lucas just stood behind him, staring at that precious metal. He pictured Marcus Webb pouring 2 years into a dream only he believed in. He thought about 40 brutal years rotting in a scrapyard. He remembered a 7-year-old boy in a dusty garage, pressing his tiny hand against the door, listening for a heartbeat. "I think so," Lucas said. "More people can see him now." Wyatt nodded. "That's good." Reaching up, he grabbed his dad's hand. "Can we get food after? I want the kind with the dipping sauce." Lucas cracked a full, unguarded smile, the genuine kind that slips out before you even realize it's there. Strangers noticed his smile, finally seeing a piece of hidden treasure without even knowing why it felt special. "Yeah," he said, "whatever you want. You and I know how this goes." By next month, Diana Caldwell's yard on Marlowe Street sprouted a for rent sign. The official story she fed to the few neighbors who still actually listened was that her shiny new office made the daily drive too tough, which was mostly true on the surface anyway. Nobody on our block bothered saying a single mean thing, because real-life justice rarely shows up with loud, dramatic fireworks. It is just the heavy regret of a choice you cannot erase, haunting your quiet nights, echoing the exact careless words you chose to broadcast out loud when the whole neighborhood was paying attention. As for Lucas, he kept his garage, kept that dusty radio right there beside the socket sets. He kept those 5 o'clock early mornings and the handwritten schedule stuck to the fridge, the Friday nights with Elijah, the simple sandwiches and black coffee. He never morphed into some totally different guy. He just settled deeper into the quiet man he already was all along. A guy who knew for sure what you and I know: real treasures never shout for attention. And the thin line separating priceless value from total garbage is usually just someone willing to actually stop and look closely at the rusted things everyone else blindly ignores. He still held silent conversations with Sarah out in that garage on late nights. Just that quiet way true love keeps a dialogue running, long after the other person's voice fades away. Not from deep sadness, but knowing that certain invisible bonds never actually end. They just shift their shape. In those still moments, he knew she would have seen the rusted classic for its true worth. She would have spotted its magic instantly in that junkyard, and marched right over without blinking. She would have touched that rusted rear panel and smiled. "I recognize this beautiful shape." He knew she would be proud of Wyatt for that perfect name. He was sure she would be proud he spent those $100.